Tyson, Chair, Health and Human Services Committee, and we are joined this afternoon by, I know, one of my council colleagues. Her office is here, Ms. Tanisha Harden, who is representing Councilmember Favors' office, and she's a legislative aide. Councilmember Favors is a joint sponsor of the topic we're talking about today. This afternoon, we will discuss Ordinance 2880, 2020, which is an update to the Civil Rights section of the Columbus City Code. The proposed legislation will amend Section 3331.01 of the Title 39 of the Columbus City Code 1959 to include hairstyles and protective and cultural hair textures as an additional protected class of individuals that are intended to be protected from discriminatory practices. This is not the first time I have brought forward legislation to change the civil rights section of the Columbus City Code. In December of 2018, I sponsored an ordinance 1865 of 2018, which amended 2331 to add additional protection for 6 different classes. And those were to prohibit discrimination on the basis of age, disability, sex, gender identity or expression, familiar status, and military status. Prior to that, the Civil Rights section of Columbus City Codes had not been changed since 1994. We added those protections in an effort to produce a better quality of life for all Columbus residents and to shape Columbus's reputation as a city that is building a community for all. However, recent events have reminded us that we still live in a country where the tradition of laws has equated Blackness and as a badge of inferiority, and as a result, have subjected people with certain features and others to separate and unequal treatment. These physical traits include skin color, curly hair, and non-Eurocentric hairstyles. These societal norms have come to embody society's very definition of professionalism. Professionalism remains closely linked to European features, mannerisms, and customs, and those which do not fall into Eurocentric norms find themselves forced to alter their appearance in drastic and permanent ways, which erase their very cultural identity, all in an effort to be accepted and respected as a professional, and ignoring the impact and the struggle within themselves to find balance in their social, emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical health. Before we get too far along, I want to publicly thank each of my colleagues for supporting Resolution 95X-2020, which passed June the 1st of 2020, declaring racism as a public health crisis in the city of Columbus. I also appreciate my fellow council members for supporting Resolution 115X 2020, which passed on July the 27th of 2020, expressing support for the Crown Act. And again, this was co-sponsored by Councilmember Favor. And it was creating a respectful and open world for natural hair, recognizing the impact of racism as a public health crisis and implicit bias in the city of Columbus is a part of our efforts to address racial inequities. We are here today to follow up on the Crown Act resolution and to make sure that the protective and cultural hairstyles provisions are a permanent part of the Columbus City Code. The Crown Act, which first came about as a result of a national effort by the Crown Coalition, which was founded by Dove, the National Urban League, the Western Center on Law and Poverty, and the Color of Change, and supported by more than 50 non-governmental organizations and nonprofit organizations. These groups have been working to raise awareness for the issue of hair discrimination and to drive action to end hair discrimination. The legislation that is being proposed today will specifically add 2 additional provisions to the Columbus City Code and will state in pertinent part that race is inclusive of traits historically associated with race, including but not limited to hair textures and protective and cultural hairstyles. And protective and cultural hairstyles includes, but is not limited to, such styles as braids, locks, cornrows, bantu knots, afros, twists, whether or not hair extensions or treatments are used to create or maintain any such style, and whether or not hair is adorned with hair ornaments, beads, or head wraps. This year, we've been reminded that racism is a public health crisis, not only in America, but in Columbus, Ohio, and around the world as well. And as the nation's 15th largest city, I believe that I can safely speak for the members of Columbus City Council when I say that we are committed to working to establishing a standard of excellence that builds traditional fairness and equity for each of the members of this community. As we continue our quest, we must ultimately want to be known as a place where people, regardless of their backgrounds, can find acceptance and where justice is not just given lip service, but codified into law. We see inequity as a threat to justice, and we, the leaders of Columbus, will fight to make sure that inequity of any type is shut down at every turn. Further, as we consider the importance of this code change in 2020, I want to reference a letter sent to President Hardin by the Women's Legal Society at The Ohio State University Moritz College of Law. The law was sent to urge council to pass an ordinance that would ban discrimination of natural hair. The letter highlights the following. Despite the assumption that hair discrimination would be included in already established federal civil rights laws prohibiting discrimination based on race, it is extremely prevalent in our society today. Just in 2017, a charter school near Boston had a policy of issuing detentions to young Black women who wore their hair in braids. In 2018, a biracial 16-year-old boy was forced to cut his dreadlocks to participate in a school wrestling match. And in 2019, a public elementary school displayed photos of Black children with braids to illustrate inappropriate haircuts. I appreciate these examples that were shared with us from the law students. And I'm also aware that discrimination based on hair textures and styles does not only occur in school, this is a practice that is all too common in the workplace as well. The official campaign of the Crown Act, led by the Crown Coalition founded by Doug, indicates that Black women are 1.5 times more likely to be sent home from the workplace because of their hair. Black women are 80% more likely than white women to agree with that statement. I have to change my hair from its natural state to fit in at the office. Now, before we begin the rest of this hearing, please be aware that this hearing is being recorded for rebroadcast on CTV, the Columbus Government Television Channel 3. The rebroadcast schedule is available at www.columbus.gov. Today, we will continue the quest of assuring that each citizen maintains a voice that advances our city's reputation as America's opportunity city. We will have testimony from people who will be sharing their perspective regarding the impact of wearing natural hairstyles in the workplace. We will hear from the City Department of Neighborhoods, who will discuss the role of the Community Relations Commission, the CRC, and highlight our city's efforts to promote equity in our community, as well as review the city's complaint procedure. We'll hear from the representatives from the city attorney's office who will review how the legislation will be enforced. And we'll hear from members of the community regarding various challenges they face and suggestions on how we can build a better community for us all. And so first, I would now like to introduce Dr. Joanna Williamson. This is the order of everyone today. We'll hear from Dr. Joanna Williamson, a professional perspective. We'll hear from Dr. Carla Williams Scott, from the Director of the Department of Neighborhoods. We will then get an overview of the CRC and pending code change proposal. We'll hear from Chris Kozad, and then she's chair of the Community Relations Commission. We'll have an overview of the complaint process from Pedro Mejia, the CRC investigator, Department of Neighborhoods, Robert Tobias from the Columbus City Attorney's Office, from the Enforcement Overview, Attorney Tobias, I'm sorry. And then we'll have an invited guest also include representatives from the following organization, the Commission on Black Girls Advisory Council. We'll hear from Britton, Caden, Amaya, and Mackenzie. And so now I would like to turn the hearing over to Director Carla Williams Scott. No, I'm sorry, before that, the first person to speak, is Dr. Joanna Williamson.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Tyson, and thank you to our esteemed public officials on the line. I'm so honored for being allowed to speak here today on behalf of passage of the Crown Act. I'm here first because I wholeheartedly and passionately believe it's my duty and my obligation and my responsibility to do this because I was born and raised in Columbus, and I've lived here and gone to school here and worked here for most of my life. I know the type of city Columbus is, and I know that the type of city that Columbus aspires to be. And I know that there are very bold people within the ranks of our city leaders and among our citizens of all ages and walks of life who are courageously acting on the belief that Columbus won't settle for anything less than equity for all citizens. So I'm here to do my part in this historic step forward. And I'm here second because as a business person, I know that the only way an organization or a city advances is to leverage the best of each one of us who collectively make up that city. And so we can't truly think that we're getting the best of any of us if, for example, rather than me being here today to talk to you about innovative issues based on the fact that I have 4 degrees, a doctorate, a law degree, an MBA, and an undergrad degree. I'm not here to talk to you about that. I'm not here to talk to you about the fact that I've led major divisions of some of the top-ranked corporate and nonprofit organizations in the world. I'm not here to talk to you about the fact that I was arguably the first African-American female to reach the rank of senior vice president in a major company in the city. I'm proud of all that, but that's not why I'm here to talk to you. I'm here to talk to you about my hair, and that's not our best. And third, I'm here because as a trainer and a facilitator and an educator, I believe that the first step to doing better is to know better. And I hope that if I share my story with you, it will add to your knowledge base of the experiences of those of us who are telling you today, respectfully, that it's about time. It's actually past time for it to stop being an American pastime to discriminate against African Americans in this city and throughout our country based on cultural differences that manifest themselves in our hair. So, my first moment of enlightenment about my own hair came 40 years ago in the 1960s. My oldest sister had earned a full-ride scholarship to Howard University, a prestigious, historically Black institution of higher learning in Washington, D.C. She came home on a school break with horrors of horrors, her hair in a very neat and very beautiful Afro hairstyle. What a horror. My family was horrified. And I listened intently to the resulting conversation between her and my dad. Now, my dad knew something about what it took for African Americans to become successful professionally. He started his career as a staff sergeant in World War II in our segregated armed forces and ended his career as one of the first 10 charter members of the Wall of Fame of what's now known as Defense Supply Center Columbus, or DSCC, on our city's east side, for being one of the highest ranking civilians at that facility and being well known in defense logistics circles nationwide. So here was a man who knew a little something about how to carve out a career. But the very first professional advice he had to give his daughter, my sister, when she came home from Howard University, was to tell her that he wanted her to take her hair out of that controversial Afro hairstyle because people would brand her as being militant. And so my slightly educated, college-educated sister at that time, she was a freshman, explained to my very worldly educated father that just as he had lived in a world where so-called militants like him had the courage to speak out against blatant racism in the form of the type of systemic segregation he grew up in, her generation had the courage and the audacity to take actions against more subtle racism, but racism nonetheless, in the form of discrimination against people who wanted to commit the simple act of wearing their hair in its natural state. And so as I listened to two of my very first personal African-American professional role models, my big sister and my dad, during my early teenage years in the 1960s, I thought back over what had been my reality ever since I was born in the 1950s. See, people within my race have hair textures that range from being what the TV ads and the comic books and the baby dolls that we played with in our youth and we looked at so longingly. Our hair ranged from that kind of texture that was called straight and silky and luxurious and beautiful. And we loved that hair as little girls, so much so that girls like me at the other end of the spectrum began to call that silky, long, luxurious hair good hair. And of course, the subtle opposite of good hair is, bad hair. Good hair was typically blonde or red or jet black that looked nothing like my hair. So as a Black child of the 1950s, one of the ways that you judged us, one of the ways that you could tease us, one of the ways that we would bully each other, the way that we would knowingly or unknowingly sap each other of our self-esteem would be to go after that nappy hair or that kinky hair or that beady hair. And not only would we call each other that, I can distinctly remember a teacher calling one of my male counterparts a nappy-headed dog when he incorrectly answered a question in one of my junior high school classrooms in the 1960s in Columbus, Ohio. So that's ancient history, right? Well, let's fast forward then to the 1970s when I went to college, not at an historically Black institution like my sister, but at an Ivy League quality Big Ten institution, Northwestern University. My Caucasian roommate had just won the crown of Miss Lake Geneva in her home state of Wisconsin, and she and I bonded to the point where she felt comfortable beginning to ask me questions about my hair. And it wasn't long before her contemporaries added their questions, like they had noticed that Black girls in our dormitories' shared bathrooms didn't wash their hair every day, and why was it that we weren't concerned about having dirty hair? And quite honestly, I was taken aback because I didn't grow up around white girls. And so I didn't know, it was news to me that they wash their hair every day, but I didn't have the privilege of asking them to explain their hair to me. So I thought I could satisfy their curiosity if I explained to them that my hair, my natural hair, was based on my Afrocentric roots, not my Eurocentric culture and roots like theirs, and that we didn't wash our hair every day because not only would that dry it out, but that hair washing when we grew up was a multi-hour ritual that included our mothers putting us in a chair in the kitchen. Some of you know what I'm talking about because I see you smiling, putting an apron around our necks, turning on the range top, heating up a hot comb or a curling iron and straightening our hair, even if it burnt our ears and burnt our necks, straightening our hair so that our hair would look like good hair. Eurocentric hair, not nappy Afrocentric hair. Or alternatively, as I did by the time I went to college, I didn't use a hot comb anymore. Instead, I would go to a hair salon. I'd have a chemical lye relaxer applied to my hair that stung my eyes and burned my scalp and made my nose run, also so that I could have good hair and not go to college and throughout life with that old bad nappy hair. And so I thought that kind of detailed answer would be enough to satisfy my Caucasian dorm mate's curiosity, but it wasn't long before I reverted to taking my showers in our shared dorm bathroom late at night after everyone was in bed to avoid the embarrassment and annoyance of the same crowd of blondes gathering around me in the bathroom to, by their own admission, gaze at how I did my hair. So if you could give me just 5 more minutes, I'm so sorry if you're tired of hearing this, but if you're tired of hearing it, just think of how tired we are of living it. If you could give me just a little bit more time, I'll even take you into the 1980s and the 1990s when my career started at Earnest back at home here in Columbus. I had the privilege of being an entry level and ultimately a mid-level and then a senior level position in a major Columbus corporation that had a white male president who was very progressive for his time. And I've since told him that and even thanked him for that. He actually called together the few minorities in management positions in the organization to ask what we could do to recruit more minorities so that we reflected our marketplace and so that we had a broad diversity of business perspective. And his same beliefs and values, like diversity and equity and inclusion and open and honest communication, those same values led him to summon me into his office one day alone so he could talk to me in private and ask me without my other African American peers overhearing him, what he suspected would be a controversial question, and it was. One of my female peers had a very short Afro hairstyle, and he didn't like it. He thought it was inappropriate. He really couldn't even explain the reasons other than that it didn't fit his view of what professional women looked like. And he wanted to know if I would talk to her about it. And he was so concerned about it that he also summoned our white female head of human resources to express the same concern to her about my colleague's hair. And since he really was an exceptional man before his time, not so much so that he didn't have this racist view, but he was exceptional enough that he was open to listening about why this was in fact a racist view when he viewed himself as being just the opposite, not a racist person. And I distinctly recall coming home and going into my closet where I kept a hard copy stack of what was somewhat revolutionary at the time, a groundbreaking publication, Essence Magazine, a magazine targeted specifically toward Black women that actually showed images of Black women to convince us and others that we really were as beautiful as those good-haired, straight-haired women. And so in my very corporate briefcase the next day, other people have their presentations and their documents. In my corporate briefcase, I had my Essence magazines to take to work to convince to the president of my organization that my colleagues' very nicely tailored Afro hairstyle was in fact appropriate and that it was him, not her, who needed the talking to. On to the 2000s, not history anymore, recent years, when I moved to the small but sophisticated and affluent town of Chapel Hill, North Carolina to pursue my doctorate. I had to return to Columbus on a regular basis, not just to visit family and friends, but to get my hair done by a stylist who understood my hair texture and composition and how to keep it looking like good hair. And when I moved back to Columbus again after I graduated, and by the way, I didn't accept some other positions in other cities because in small towns, they often don't have people who can do Black women's hair. And professionally, I had to have my hair looking good. So when I came back to Columbus, my longtime stylist broke the news to me that my hair had become so very damaged by the stylist who didn't know how to style it that I had no choice but to go natural. Not necessarily even to showcase my natural hair, but to protect my natural hair, to allow her to take out all of the relaxers and chemicals that had damaged my hair and to let my hair grow naturally. And so it's just been within the past 5 years that I have been bold enough, that I felt empowered enough to step into the workplace for the very first time in my 4-decade career with my nappy Black hair pulled back into beautiful braids, 55 years after my sister first declared her independence as a college student, 60 years after the first time I had noticed as a little girl that the images of women I was seeing that were good people had good hair. And so in closing, I'll share with you that I took this bold move of showing up with my hair pulled back in natural braids on the day of a very important meeting. And in yet another show of the problem of misplaced priorities, I was more nervous about my hair than I was about the substance of my presentation. And as fate would have it, before the meeting started, we got word that one of the key executives was going to be a little bit late because he had to drop off his daughter at school. And so we went ahead and started the meeting. And when he entered a bit late, he confirmed my suspicion that all eyes were on my hair, because as he took his seat, he stopped and turned around and he said, "Your hair." And as I held my breath, He finished his thought by saying that when his daughters were younger and came to visit him as a single dad, he would braid their hair in that style. And he hadn't seen a woman wearing their hair that way in so long. And then he took a seat. And then I took a deep breath. And so thank you to City Council for your hopeful passage of this measure. Because when we allow this to continue, not only do we miss out on what we could be talking to each other about, when we instead have to talk to each other about hair, but we also step on the spirits of our citizens starting at a very young age, so that even if they do overcome discrimination to reach their dreams, they're marginalized in such a way every day that can't help but impact the effort they have to put forward just to get through a day, much less to get through a performance cycle. Finally, in my role now as a consultant, and a strategic meeting facilitator, just very recently, within the past year, just before COVID, a Black female in one of my sessions expressed the same types of concerns that I've shared with you today. And then a white male inevitably said, just as some of you are likely thinking about right now, that this isn't really about race. Why are we playing the race card again? Everybody has to worry about what their hair looks like. And I asked him, as I would ask all of you, to envision that we both had job interviews coming up. And we make appointments at side by and we tell them to make us look our professional best. And when we emerge and we see each other on the sidewalk as we leave those appointments, his hair will have to look good. My hair will not only have to look good, but I'll have that double standard of not just having hair that looks good, but having good hair. We can no longer marginalize our citizens in that way. So we need to pass this measure because it's not just about me, it's about time. It's past time. Now that we know better, we have to do better to better leverage our human resources and to make those resources know that they're the valuable assets we have known them to be, no matter what their hair looks like. We have to pass the crown in. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Williamson, for certainly sharing your own professional perspective on how you have had to giving us a great timeline of what you have personally have had to go through. Like most Black women, I saw Director Colleen Scott smiling on some of certainly the challenges that Black women face. And yes, it is time for this to change. So thank you for your testimony today. And we're now going to hear from Director Carla Williams Scott. Director, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Councilmember Tyson. And Dr. Williamson, thank you for your words. Really hit home. So thank you very much. I'm honored to have the opportunity to speak today in support of this Crown Act Ordinance 2880. As a front door to the city for our residents, the Department of Neighborhoods and the City of Columbus, we want to make sure that everyone can navigate and understand the protections from discrimination that currently exist in our city. We appreciate the strong partnership with you and our members of City Council to make sure that our city code remains up to date and is addressing current concerns. We also recognize the importance of ensuring that those who choose to wear natural hairstyles do not face discrimination when it comes to employment, housing, or public accommodations. We support expanding a protection to Columbus that currently exists for residents in communities such as Cincinnati and Railsburg. We look forward to returning to City Council early next year with a proposal to further protect residents from discrimination. Community Relations Commission Chair Chris Kozad will share some additional details on this proposal in a moment. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. If not, at this time, I would like to ask Chris Kozad, our chair of the Community Relations Commission, to share our work and update protections from discrimination in the city code. Chris?
Thank you, Director William Scott. Councilwoman Tyson, it's nice to see you. I'm happy to be here. I cannot begin to tell you how strongly I support this. On behalf of all of the commissioners of the Community Relations Commission, we definitely 100% support Ordinance 2880, and we appreciate the opportunity to work with you all to continue to improve protections against discrimination for our Columbus residents. As you're aware, the Community Relations Commission is a division of the Department of Neighborhoods, and I have chaired the commission the last 2 years, and I've served on the commission since 2004. Discrimination is a very passionate issue for me for lots of personal reasons. And so I bring some of that passion to this work. We have always in Columbus led the state and the region in our non-discrimination protections. We have expanded our protected classes a few times over the years, and actually the CRC is currently working with council and the city attorney's office and the Department of Neighborhoods to do another comprehensive upgrade to the non-discrimination ordinance and protected classes in particular. So we have been researching this on a separate path from you, Councilwoman Tyson, and we are right in line. We think this is so important. Of course, the CRC is the body who is charged with the enforcement of this the code, and we have spent the last couple of years upgrading our processes, refining our processes and procedures, which Pedro Mejia will talk about shortly. He's our investigator for CRC. But we look forward to coming back early in 2021 with a complete package of additional changes that the commission would like to see made to 2331 to address this, as we hope to continue to lead the state and the region in having a comprehensive and functional and enforceable code to offer justice and support to our residents. We are also looking at adding some other components to that, including looking at potential civil remedies as well as the current criminal remedies that are in 2331. So I have been very immersed in the code for the last year. We're meeting bi-weekly, word by word, line by line. But it's been an amazing process, and the city attorney's office and the department and council and the mayor's office have all had pieces of this. And so we are looking very much forward to a comprehensive upgrade of 2331 the beginning of next year. It had been our original goal to be doing it right now, but with COVID, things got slowed down a little bit, as we're all well aware. But I am delighted to support this Crown Act protection and including that in 2331. So I'm also happy to take questions. If there aren't any, I would turn it over to Pedro to go over a bit of our nuts and bolts, our process and procedures. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Kozad. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Pedro Mejia. I'm a community relations coordinator with the Department of Neighborhoods, and my role at the Department of Neighborhoods is to serve as the investigator for the Community Relations Commission. I would like to take some time to talk about our process at the Department of Neighborhoods, from the alleged incident all the way through resolution. We try to make it easy for anyone to file a complaint, and the reason that you would file a complaint with the community relations specifically is because the incident in question either occurred within the city of Columbus limits or occurred for an alleged reason that is protected in Columbus and not elsewhere. And that's because federal and state and local protections for discrimination are all different and all investigated by different organizations. So the Columbus Community Relations Commission is every Columbus resident or anybody conducting business in Columbus tool to prevent and fight against discrimination. As has been mentioned, we have 12 protected classes, and we're currently looking at expanding that through this legislation and various other legislation to make sure that protections against discriminatory action are protected against in Columbus. Quickly, those 12 protected classes are race, sex, color, religion, ancestry, national origin, gender identity or expression, sexual orientation, age, disability, familial status, and military status. The code protects against unfair treatment for any of these reasons. And there are 3 areas in which you can file a complaint. Those 3 areas are public accommodation, housing, and employment. So if something were to have occurred to you in those areas for a protected reason, we would be more than happy to get in touch with you and begin that process. So getting into that process, the CRC will offer you a efficient, thorough, and fair investigation, voluntary options to resolve your complaint through mediation, which is always a priority of the CRCs, and information to file with other agencies, because we recognize that it's very confusing to understand where you should file and how long you have to file them. So we're here to offer that information as well. So far in 2020, nearly 50% of the complaints that the CRC has received were filed under the protected class of race. And that is not an atypical result for the year. Considering the legislation that we're speaking of today, we know that it's of incredible importance when we look at data relating to protected classes that are being exercised. And we definitely saw that this year. To file a complaint with the CRC, you really have 3 options. The first and foremost is online. If you Google Columbus discrimination or go a little step further, we have a nice little link called columbus.gov/discrimination. And that will get you started on the process, let you know about our policies and how to move forward. So online is number 1. Number 2, you can always give us a call. With COVID, we were all moving around, and typically we would advise you to call 645-1993, which is the phone for the Department of Neighborhoods. That's still a viable option as we are, receiving voicemails. But you can also reach me as the investigator for the CRC via phone at number 614-645-8141. So there's your phone option. And then third and finally, if you prefer, you're able to download the complaint form online, have it printed out and submit it by mail to 1410 Cleveland Avenue, Columbus, Ohio, 43211, our new home. Those are the 3 ways that you can file a complaint. And I am also here to answer any questions about the process. Once again, I'd like to ask those watching to visit columbus.gov/discrimination. And I would now like to turn it over to Robert Tobias, who's an assistant city attorney and has really helped us out in understanding how to move forward with these.
The all-important unmute button. So good afternoon to everybody. I appreciate all the comments and remarks thus far, and also want to echo some of the sentiments that have been expressed about the level of cooperation between the Department of Neighborhoods, the CRC staff, the City Attorney's Office, City Council, as we're all working towards the same goal to move this legislation forward. So just want to thank you. And I would also be remiss if I did not also give a shout out to both Laura Baker Marish, our Chief Counsel, and Alyssa Wilson, who's also with the General Counsel section. They've done a lot of the heavy lifting here as well. And so I just want to make sure that everybody knows that they've been deeply involved in the process as well on this project. My understanding today, Todd and Pedro have asked me to talk about the process, basically, what the complaint, after a complaint's been filed, what the hearing process or the investigative process or both would look like. And so I've jotted down some notes here to my right. So if you see me glancing to the right, it's just to reference my notes to make sure that I'm including everything that I think is important for you to hear, but also to make sure that it's an overview. I won't get into the weeds necessarily this afternoon. Things are going to initially start out informally. Once the complaint is filed, Pedro is going to do an investigation, collect information, collect evidence, and ultimately will reach a point where he is determining, coming up with a conclusion as to whether it's probable or not probable that some type of discrimination has occurred. If his determination is that it's not probable, he would then approach the CRC to have some action taken to potentially dismiss the complaint. If he believes his conclusion is that it's probable that discrimination has occurred, then he would use terms I'll use are conference or conciliation or persuasion or mediation, those types of resolution techniques to try to reach some measure of success on the complaint. And if that's successful, then Pedro would be addressing the CRC for purposes of moving to close that complaint because the complainant has received some type of successful resolution and is satisfied with the outcome of those dispute resolution techniques. If there is no success when using conciliation, persuasion, mediation, then the next potential steps would be a referral to the prosecutor division for potential approval of criminal charges, which currently exists, but as most folks on this call know, not used very often because of the inherent difficulties with the collection of evidence and being able to satisfy the burden of proof in a criminal action on those types of matters. What's great about this new legislation is that it will be creating a civil penalty option, which is the kind of comma or provision here. If we're not going to do, if the CRC is not going to move to refer a matter to the prosecutor division, would be the Pedro approaching the commission to move to have the CRC find that there's been an administrative violation of discrimination and assessing a fine. And the fine schedule will be laid out in the statute. If that occurs, that's where all of this becomes new. And these are the things that we've been working on and trying to put in place in the statute. If a civil penalty is going to be assessed for due process considerations, the complaint, the party that's been complained against, the business, the person, would have the right to a hearing. The hearing process would involve a hearing officer, and both the CRC staff, probably through my representation, would be putting forth evidence. The party that is the respondent in the complaint would have an opportunity to present a case in front of the hearing officer. And ultimately, what would happen is the hearing officer would prepare a report. And in that report, it would contain some legal terms called findings of fact and conclusions of law, basically indicating whether, similarly in the informal stage, whether it's probable, not probable that discrimination occurred, and making recommendations to the CRC as to whether the initial assessment of the fine should be upheld or dismissed. Once the hearing officer files that report, both parties would be able to get a copy of that report and review it, and then could file objections to the report if they want to. It's not required. And then ultimately, the CRC would review both the report of the hearing officer and any objections that are filed by either or both parties, and ultimately would have the final authority to either approve, modify, or disapprove of the recommendation of the hearing officer. And that would be the final outcome as to whether to uphold the fine or not. Ultimately, because of provisions within Section 2506 of the Ohio Revised Code, there is an additional appeal that's available if the respondent wants to do that. That would be filed in the Court of Common Pleas. And again, the city attorney's office would represent the CRC in that capacity in the Common Pleas Court if the case were to be appealed further down outside of the CRC. So that's just pretty much a broad overview of the process, the hearing process, the civil penalty assessment. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have, but if I'm looking at the agenda, it looks like we're going to move on to some guests, and maybe I should be turning this back over to Councilmember Tyson to handle those duties.
Yes, so thank you very much, Attorney Tobias. And we will now hear some testimony from the Commission on Black Girls, the Girls Advisory Council. And I don't know who's going to start first. We have Amaya, Britton, and Mackenzie, and Kaden. So I will let them share their thoughts about the ordinance that we're talking about today, or changes to the code. So who wants to start first?
Okay, I'll go first. Don't touch my hair. It's the feelings I wear.
Don't touch my crown, they say the vision I found.
Who's talking first?
Don't touch what's there when it's the feelings I wear.
Oh,
Hi, I'm Maya.
I'm Kaden.
And I'm Mackenzie, and we are all members of the Commission on Black Girls Advisory Board. Black hair has evolved from decade to decade, has set trends through songs such as Solange's Don't Touch My Hair, and has been the face of political movements such as the Black Panthers and South Africa's own Black conscious movements. Over the years, we have taken all the time to learn about our natural hair and the history behind it.
In the 1400s and 1500s, before European slave ships came, many Africans would spend days and hours on their hair, styling their hair in locs, plaits, and twists. In African culture, their hair represented their identity. By just looking at an African's hair, you could know which tribe they were from, information on their family background, and social and marital status. Many African tribes believed that their hair was a spiritual connection with God because it was closer to the sky. In the Wolof tribe, which is now located in modern-day Senegal and the Gambia, men went to war in braided hairstyles. Africans used special combs and coils to help maintain their hair. A woman who was grieving in their tribe would either not do their hair or wear a somber style. Hair traditions like these did not continue when brought to the New World.
During the 16th to the 18th century, during the time when slaves were dragged onto European ships and taken to foreign land, their hair was cut off. This took away their sense of culture and identity. Slaves had headbats to protect them from harsh weather. In some states in the South, women were required to wear them because their hair was considered distracting.
Slaves that resembled close to whites were seen as more socially acceptable and more beautiful. Being stripped away from our heritage has led us to find ourselves reinventing and serving the importance of natural hair. Here are the experiences and the beauty of natural hair that we had. As a Black girl who often does protective styles and is frequently experimenting with my own natural hair, I like to advocate others to say that it's important and is it okay to love your natural hair. And you need to embrace your natural hair. Everyone has their own journey to loving their natural curls and coils, figuring out what works for them and what doesn't. Exploring different ways to style my hair trends and my own creativity allows me to love my hair, my natural self, and the cultural significance of it.
During my difficult transitioning phase, I was told by many other white classmates that my hair looked better while straightened, and some even went as far as telling me what hairstyles I should and should not wear. Like many other Black Indigenous people of color, I came into situations where my hair was called exotic and touched without my approval. Experiences and comments such as these did not make this difficult phase for me any better. But through this experience, I was able to learn how to truly love my own curls and coils and not compare my journey in hair to others.
I don't consider finding out my curl pattern. What product suit my curls overall, loving my texture, my shrinkage, and frizz. It is definitely not a linear process. Loving my hair has given me a sense of identity and Black community that I never had before. My hair is not an exotic showcase, but rather a peaceful manifestation of Black history, deeply rooted between each Berlin table. The yellow love hair is an experience that any person of color will go through. But it's truly such a beautiful thing.
Everyone has different experience with their natural hair at all different extremes. Girls have been expelled from school, taunted by their peers, hate crime, and more. But each time these horrible experiences have happened, Black girls have come back stronger than ever and ready to flaunt their natural hair. That's the beautiful thing about natural hair. It grows and changes along with us, each strand strengthening after every downfall. Natural hair is essential to the emotional and mental growth of young Black Indigenous people of color, and it should not be shamed upon.
Black hair is important today because for so long, society thought that our hair isn't beautiful.
They told us to resent our hair.
They told you to conform to Eurocentric beauty standards.
They told us it was too wild and needs to be tamed.
But what they didn't tell us is that our hair resembles the trees and grows toward the sun. They didn't tell us to embrace our pros and cons.
They didn't tell us the bigger the hair, the greater the power.
So that being said, we are proud to recognize this historical moment of the passing of the Crown Act. Through the Crown Acts, we hope that all Black Indigenous people of color will no longer be discriminated against because of their natural hair in schools and work environments and communities. And as young leaders and role models, we hope to guide other individuals to being confident in accepting their natural hair.
Culture, individuality, and power are rooted in natural hair. And with the Crown Act, natural hair will no longer be a fear of other Black Indigenous people of color, but a rite of passage of breaking class ceilings and exhibiting confidence that is needed in times like these.
Once again, I'm Kaden.
I'm Maya. I'm Mackenzie.
And I'm Brent, and we thank you for taking the time to listen to a very important issue.
Thank you. And again, I am not sure why we had some of the difficulties in hearing a couple of these amazing young women, but I also, I know that they worked hard on their presentation or testimony in support of the legislation that's before us today. I am going to ask them if they send that to us, and if they could send that testimony to my office, because I do really appreciate hearing their thoughts and concerns. And I'm hoping that the viewing and listening audience certainly heard from a professional today, Dr. Joanna Williamson, but certainly heard from three amazing young women, Britton, Kaden, and Amaya, and Mackenzie, to share their testimony as in support of this legislation as to why this is so important. The change to the code is so important for them. And again, I know that this code does not, the code change is again for employment, fair housing, and public accommodation. But I truly believe that the passing that by the actions that we are taking today to have this hearing, as well as the action that my council colleagues support this legislation on Monday, that this will certainly allow us to be able to have conversations with certainly school districts, as a law student stated from Ohio State we had some examples in our testimony today. And so I don't have any questions. I think that all the speakers today certainly shared the information with us in regards to the change of this particular code. And this hearing really is about fairness and equity, and we must never lose sight of the struggles that others have faced. And none of us are not free until, again, all of us have this opportunity to be free. And we recognize that the challenges with racism are not new. For some, they are as ever-present part of their everyday experience. And so today, as this conversation, that we have been able to have a better understanding of how women how girls and women have been discriminated against because of their hair, we are certainly taking action to be able to change that experience for our community. And so again, I need to thank Councilmember Favor and her team for helping to co-sponsor this legislation. I want to thank the members of City Council. I want to thank Dr. Joanna Williamson for her testimony over 50 years of life, of her experiences that she's had to endure based upon her hair. Director Carla Williams Scott and Tom Diefendorfer I have to just say thank you to them, because I know that they have been working diligently on updating of this part of the code. And because of certainly Councilman Favor and I, and the resolution that we passed on the Crown Act, that they were willing to have this discussion and bring this portion of our legislation forward, and working with us to share this now before the end of the year. And I thank them and their team for doing this. I have to thank Pedro Mejia for his work, as well as Chris Kozak. Chris, we certainly have worked on a lot of legislation together over the years, as I mentioned earlier, and you were always a part of those initial changes that we made. So I do want to thank the members of the Community Relations Commission, that they work each and every day to ensure that our people in our community can be free of discrimination. And then Attorney Tobias and Laura Baker Marsh and the entire team from the City Attorney's Office, I thank you for helping us to move this legislation forward. Then the Commission on Black Girls. I just really appreciate the work that they did in preparing for this, because again, these are the future leaders, and to give them experience to have their thoughts shared in support of this legislation. So Britton, Caden, Amaya, and Mackenzie, thank you. I always have to thank CTV, because certainly without them, we would not be able to provide these hearings to our residents. I want to also thank Angela Burks from the City Council's office, and certainly today we had from the council's office. I want to thank all the clerk staff for helping us today in this. And finally, I want to thank our residents who allow us to serve them each and every day. And so again, I want to say thank you to everyone that was here today. And last, I want to thank Avery. This is Avery's first time hosting a hearing. So thank you, Avery, for your work today. And again, I look forward to this legislation being on the council floor on Monday, and passing this legislation to make sure that individuals that are not discriminated based upon their hair in support of the Crown Act. And thank you. And this hearing is adjourned.